Shalom, welcome to the Temple Institute, Machon HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. By the time this gets aired, it would seem that Purim had already passed. At least in Jerusalem it will be still happening, but everywhere else it will have passed. But nevertheless, it's a happy time, as we said before, Mishenichnas Adar Marbek B'Simcha. Certainly Purim is a very, very happy holiday where good conquers evil. And the story, of course, appears in Megillat Esther. We actually have a scroll that describes the whole story that happened in Purim. And it was a time in Paras, in Persia, is when the miracle of Purim happened. Many, many years ago in Galut, in exile. I'd like to describe to you, based on Chazal, our rabbis, and the psukim that appear in the Megillah, to show you the connection between Purim and the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. And there are so many references that I'm only going to share a few with you, because we could be here for a couple hours. And we're talking about both the Gemara Megillah, as well as the Medrash Rabbah, Esther in particular. And in both cases, they describe that the whole events, and also what happened, and why the Jews were threatened of annihilation, had a lot to do with the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, and the way they treated the Beit HaMikdash, and the way they thought about the Beit HaMikdash. And let's start here within the beginning of Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther, for those that don't know, is actually 10 chapters. It's fascinating, Megillat Esther, because it's really a story. It's unusual for a large part of the Bible to have such a detailed story. And in fact, there's a word missing in all of Megillat Esther. One word is missing in that Megillat Esther. I was thinking of throwing it out as a riddle, but I won't do that to you. The word that's missing in Megillat Esther is Hashem, is God's name. And in fact, the word Esther comes from the word nistar, hidden. And on a certain level, Esther certainly hid her identity as a Jew, but also God's name does not appear and is hidden from the Megillah itself. And there's many reasons for that. But perhaps we could suggest one of the reasons was because God's Shekhinah was floating. It didn't have a resting place. It didn't have a place. It didn't have a temple. And so it was missing. And Megillat Esther was because it was also missing from the Jewish people's hearts, the idea of building the temple, as we will see. And perhaps that's why the word was missing in the Megillat Esther itself. I don't know. That's my suggestion to you. But it certainly makes a lot of sense. So let's start off with the beginning of Megillat Esther, where it says, it was in the third year of the reign that Ahasuerus made a mishteh. He made a party. And there it says, actually Chazal say in Medrash Rabbah, Rabbi Nechemia Amar Bishnat Shalosh Lebiltal Melechet Beit HaMikdash. Why did he make a party in the third year? Because Ahasuerus had stopped the building of the temple in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. And it says here, Kemen Shagamar Lebiltal Melechet Beit HaMikdash Shalosh Shanim Asa Mishteh L'Chosar V'Avadav. Seeing that the Mikdash had been stopped, he was very happy that he had stopped the building of the temple, and therefore made a party because he had stopped it. And guess who was instrumental in stopping the building of the Mikdash? You guessed it, Haman, as it says in Esther Rabbah 2. Vayatz la'Achashverosh levatal binyan Beit HaMikdash. Haman was the one who had suggested to Ahasuerus to stop the building of the temple in Jerusalem. And in fact, the temple wasn't built for 18 years. And it was Esther's son, Darius, who allowed the building of the temple once again. So it took quite a few years until we were able to start rebuilding the temple. But you see already the connection between the story of Purim and the temple. And now when he made the party, it says there, Beharatot Osher Kvod Malchuto, that Ahasuerus wanted to show off his riches and the riches and honor of his kingdom. And it says over there in Megillah, in Masechet Megillah, in the tractate Megillah on the 12th page. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, Melamed shelavish bigdei kohuna. At this party, Ahasuerus put on the clothing of the high priest. And they prove it because of the words that they use in the psukim in Megillah as well as the psukim in the Torah. And through that comparison, they come to that conclusion. Next, Vashti, who was Ahasuerus' first queen, before Esther, So she came from Nebuchadnezzar, who had destroyed the first temple. And it says, and we know that in the first parak already, the first chapter of Megillat Esther, Vashti was killed by Ahasuerus himself. And why was that? Because she too got Ahasuerus to stop the building of the temple. As it says, V'lama alta lakach, why did she end up getting killed? Chazal want to know, our rabbis want to know. It says, L'fish lo hayta manachet l'Achashverosh litan reshut livnot Beit HaMikdash. She wouldn't allow Ahasuerus to let the Jews build the temple. Ve'omert lo, and she would say to Ahasuerus, Ma she'echriva avotai, ata mevakesh livnot. What my forefathers stopped, they destroyed the temple. You want to let them build it? So she was instrumental in what happened to her. She was killed. You see what's going on here. There's an energy going on here with the Mikdash. And now that at the party, it says that, and also in the Medrash, Hevi kelabu klei Beit HaMikdash. They had all the vessels from the temple, and they used those vessels at that party of Ahasuerus. And unfortunately, the Jews too were at that party, and they too drank from those vessels. And that was not obviously a good thing. Next we go on, that because of the Esther Rabbah, which is Medrash Rabbah on Esther, says because they used these kelim, that's why they all died. That's why Vashti died, and that's why Ahasuerus lost his kingdom. As it says over there, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Nachman, it says in the pasuk, kelim mikelim shonim. That's what it says in the actual verse in Esther. And it says that these kelim were different. The mishtamshim bahem, those that used them. Behem shonim bekalkala, and they were different in what they did. There was a destructive force for misusage of the vessels of the temple. Mi garam leBelshazzar, King Belshazzar, shenitkateh bitzato, that he died. Min olam, from the world. Lo ayidesh nishtash bekli Beit HaMikdash. It was because he used the vessels of the Mikdash, and so too here at this party. And because he used it, Vashti was killed in the end. That caused her death. But what was the tikkun? In other words, when we want to fix something, we have a problem. The Jews participated in this party against Mordechai's wishes. There were other people there like rabbis, and they left supposedly. That's what Chazal tell us. But the point is, they were participating here. They were seeing the vessels. They were seeing Ahasuerus in the Kohen Gadol's bigadim, in the clothing of the high priest. This is a terrible thing that they were doing. It was an abuse of everything to do with the temple. Certainly that's connected to what was going to happen to them, to the Jewish people. That's why there was a gzeirah, decree, that they will be annihilated. So the Jewish people, they understood this. Esther and Mordechai, they both understood this. And so in order to fix it, what do, right? Mida keneged mida. Well, I messed up when it comes to the temple. The way to fix it is to do something and teach the Torah Tamikdash. Teach them the Torah having to do with the temple. And that's exactly what happened. The way to fix it was through learning the halachot of the temple. And we see that that's what Mordechai did. We remember that there were two characters in the Megillat Esther. They were called Bigdan and Teresh. They were bad guys. They wanted to poison, well, maybe they weren't, but they wanted to poison Ahasuerus. And Mordechai understood their language. Having been part of the Sanhedrin in the first temple, he understood the language, actually, that they spoke, which was a unique language. There's 70 languages, and someone who's on the Sanhedrin has to at least speak them or understand them. And in Mordechai's case, he knew all the languages. And Mordechai understood that they wanted to poison Ahasuerus, and he reported this information to Ahasuerus. They were subsequently killed, but Mordechai was meant to get a reward from the king for saving his life. And as we know in Perek Vav, in the 6th Perek in Megillat Esther, that Laila hu nadada shnata melach, that night the king's sleep was very shaky. He couldn't sleep well. And he remembered, I have to pay back Mordechai. I have to pay him back. And so at the end the story keeps going on, and he ended up sending Haman to bring Mordechai, that he would take him through the streets and treat him like a king. That Mordechai was to be treated like a king, and the person to do that was Haman. And suddenly everything was turning, right? Haman's whole life was turning. At first he was thinking, I'm going to be able to kill all the Jews. And now it started to turn. Events started to change, and Haman started to be on the bottom and Mordechai on top. And when it comes to that, there's a famous Gemara on this. Because Haman comes to pick up Mordechai. And Mordechai, what is he doing? He's teaching Torah. They're learning Torah. And what are they learning? They're learning Torah Mikdash. They're learning Torah. They're actually learning Torah about korbanot, about the offerings. And I'll actually read this to you. Haman was on his way to Mordechai, and he took the clothing of the king as well as the horse of the king that Mordechai would eventually ride on. And here I'll quote you the Gemara. Azal ashkechei diyatve rabban kamei. And Haman arrived to pick up Mordechai, and he saw all the chachamim were there, all the rabbis were there. And they were showing the hilchot kamitza to the rabbis. Mordechai was showing them how to do the halacha of kmitza. So you know what kmitza is, that when you bring a grain offering called a korban mincha, the Kohen would scoop a little bit of it. That's called a kamitza. These two fingers on the outside, this brushes it off here and this brushes it off here. What's left in here is called kamitza. This part would go in the fire on the altar, on the mizbeach. And that was the halachot of kamitza. Very clear that they were discussing the halachot of korbanot. Came in the Chazia Mordechai da'apik lekable. When Mordechai saw Haman's there to get him, v'susem yachad biyadeh, and that he was holding on to the cow, onto the horse, mirtat. He got nervous, he got scared. Mordechai got scared here. Amalu l'rabban, and Mordechai told the other rabbis that were with him, this Russia, this bad person, is coming to kill me. Get away from me, so you won't get caught up in the fire of his coals. In other words, you don't get killed by him too. You won't get burned by him. And by he shot at that moment, Mordechai's nervous. Mordechai put on his talit and he started to pray. Haman sat down by the rabbis and he's waiting for Mordechai. Amar lehu, Haman's curious. He's asking the rabbis, the massito, what were you learning? Amar, they said, Bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam. In the time when the mikdash was there, existed, in those days, if someone made certain of the offerings, you could bring a korban mincha, a grain offering, if you couldn't afford an animal. And he said that a person would bring this mincha, this grain offering, they would take a little komets, as I showed you, and and the Kohen would throw it on the mizbeach. And what does it say? It would bring forgiveness for him. This little thing would forgive him. And that was the kindness of God. He didn't require you to spend a lot of money to get forgiveness. So Amar lehu, Haman says back to them, I've lost. Ata male kumse kimcha didchu. This little komets of yours has come, and has nullified the 10,000 silver coins I gave Ahasuerus. If you remember, Haman gave Ahasuerus 10,000 silver coins so that he could kill the Jewish people. And now he's saying, this little comets you're discussing, this is going to destroy all my plans. And in fact, at the end, after Haman was killed, there's a Yalkut Shimoni, which is a mandarish, and it says, Tana, one of the great Tanaim learned, after Haman was killed, they took his money, and he was very rich, obviously, and they took his money, and they gave Shlish to Mordechai and Esther, a third went to Mordechai and Esther, Shlish la'amlei Torah, a third went to the people who were learning Torah, obviously they must have had kolalim or something, they were given to the people learning Torah, the Shlish, the binyan Beit HaMikdash, and 1/3 went to building the temple. And you see how things evolve, right? At first we thought we were going to get killed as a people, and at the end not only did you not get killed, but you ended up getting rewarded. For why? Because they understood that in order to fix the situation, they had to put all their energies towards the temple. And I think that's an amazing, amazing insight into what's going on in Purim, and we can learn a lot from that. And you know, elections are coming up in Israel for, I don't know, what is it now, 30th time, 40th time in the last 3 years? I'm just kidding. But it feels like that at times. So we have elections again. And what we have to hope and pray to God is that we're going to have a leader that understands the mitzvot of the Torah, the commandments of God's Torah, and also understands the will of God. And what his will is that we have to build a temple. And you see from what we talked about the shkalim last week, and here on Purim too, how important it is for us to dedicate ourselves to this world of the Mikdash and how it only brings good for those that do. Thank you very much.